Who are you most willing to part ways with in a trade as we head towards the winter meetings?
You are Locked On Cubs, your daily Chicago Cubs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Cubs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Sam Olber, and I'm a lifelong fan, taking my passion into a discussion with you on all things Cubs. Thanks for being part of the show and making Locked On Cubs your first listen today. And the best way you can help us grow the show is to listen every day, like the video, and comment anything below. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Friday, everybody, as it's become normal at this time. I'm solo for the Friday episode, and I got a good one for you today. I'm excited about this episode because we've talked so much about trades, and we're going to continue to talk about trades. I think it's going to be the thing we talk most about for the next month or so. And most of the discussion is centered around who are the Cubs going to get? Who should the Cubs trade for, et cetera, et cetera. And I want to flip it a little bit today. And I want to hear from you in the comments about the guys you are most willing to part ways with. The guys that if the Cubs trade, you say, all right, that's fine. Or, oh, no. I don't want to move on from him. And, there's some parameters here. We're going to use some common sense, right? I don't think that the Cubs are going to move on from PCA. I don't think they're going to move on from Matt Shaw. And I don't want to talk minor leaguers. We've already done a trade value episode, so you can go back and watch that if you have any questions about what the order of the minor leaguers should be. This is big league roster only and legitimately guys that we could see being traded. I've narrowed it down to 4 names. No Justin Steele, no Imanaga. Those guys aren't going to go anywhere unless there's some sort of blockbuster that none of us see coming. We know Dansby can't be traded. We know that Seiya and Happ also have no trade clauses. So it's a list of 4 guys. It's Paredes, Bush, Bellinger, and Horner. Those 4 guys. And I want to know what in the order of most willing to part ways with your ranking of those 4 guys, and I'm going to rank them. I'm going to rank them and tell you the pros and cons of trading them, because I think some of them are going to be gone here coming up, who knows, in the next week, 2 weeks, could be a month. We know how the offseason goes. So the number one guy that I would be most willing to move on from, basically saying I'm okay with him being traded. And what makes this so fascinating is this isn't a knock on anybody. This is just, it's such an interesting exercise because the Cubs don't really have anybody. That's the problem. We've talked about this. They don't have anybody where you go, man, if you just trade so-and-so, they'll be in great shape. There's nobody that's an albatross. There's nobody that's really keeping them away from winning. It's just that there's no major solution. There's no guy that's putting them over the edge. So it's a really it's almost like a negligible list, but I think it's kind of fun and marginal. And I'm curious your guys' thoughts. So number 1 for me, Cody Bellinger. I am ready to move on from Cody Bellinger. I am ready to part ways from him. Matt and I differ on this. He answered this question on yesterday's show, and I think Bellinger was 3rd for him. And the reason why he's number 1 for me, it's no knock on Cody Bellinger. It's this. We talk about on this show a lot, and because Jed's talked about it, this phrase of outperforming projections. And one thing I think that is interesting about that is there's another branch of outperforming projections, and that's outperforming salary, right? Getting team-friendly deals, getting guys to produce that aren't making a lot of money. Right. So you rewind back to 2016. Chris Bryant was the MVP of the league, and he was still, on his service time, deals. Cubs didn't have to pay him yet. What that does is it creates tremendous flexibility. The Cubs had a really bad contract in Jason Hayward on that 2016 team, but it didn't matter because they had guys like, Chris Bryant and Anthony Rizzo and Baez that were all, hadn't gotten their big MLB contract yet that were producing. And we always have these conversations. Well, the Cubs are spending X amount more money than the Brewers, and yet they're not that good of a team, or the Brewers are way better. And I think one reason for that is position player wise, they just haven't got a ton of bang for their buck yet. On the starting pitching front, they have Imanaga pitched like a $30 million a year guy last year. Justin Steele has pitched like a $30 million pitcher the last 2 years. That's been really good. But on the position player side, where we just kind of feel kind of Dansby Swanson, it's not an albatross. It's not a terrible contract, but he hasn't been a $27.5–$25 million a year guy. Ian Happ has been fine. He's been probably right around where you would expect him to be based on his salary. Same with Seiya Suzuki. But you don't want guys to just be right around. You want to get guys that overperform what they're getting paid. It's no knock on them. It's not like the Cubs are trying to be, are trying to shortchange these players by underpaying them, but that's what good organizations do. Unless you're the Dodgers or the Yankees that just throw money at everybody, which we know and we've talked about ad nauseum, the Cubs aren't. It's really helpful to have some guys that outperform what they're getting paid. And I just don't think Cody Bellinger has a chance to do that. I just don't. 2 years ago, he performed like a $30 million player. But part of that was because he was playing center field. He's not going to be a center fielder on this team. He's going to be a corner outfielder making $27.5 million. And I just don't see him offensively performing to that level. And because of that, I think the Cubs are going to move him. I'm okay to move him. And if they can get somebody in his place that's making a lot less money, that produces just as much, it gives you more flexibility. It gives you the idea to go take a shot on a guy because Matt Shaw and Owen Casey, you don't have to worry about paying them for a while, but they're still going to produce. And I just think because of that idea, I think Cody Bellinger is number one on my list. It's nothing to do with him as a player. It's just the Cubs have too many guys that are making real money that either are just right about where they're supposed to be or, not enough. Now, you go to the Dodgers because the type of guys that they're paying, those guys, like if Ohtani just performs to what he's getting paid, that's plenty. But that's not how the Cubs roster is constructed. They need some guys to outperform that. And Bellinger, I just don't think you're going to get that. Bush was a guy, a pre-arb guy that you got a really nice season out of. That's really good. And we'll talk about him later on. But the Cubs need more of that. And I just think Bellinger is another one of those guys that's going to have a large salary that's just going to kind of be okay. And I think the Cubs need to pivot from that. Now, the con of trading him, very simple. What if you get 2023 Bellinger? Because 2023 Bellinger is plenty of bang for your buck. And, is the exact type of hitter that this team needs. And, it does feel a little bit short-sighted to just be like, well, that's not going to happen because it only, it was just 2 years ago. But I just, my gut tells me, it's time to move on there. So he would be number one on my list of guys I'd be most willing to part ways with out of this four. Number two is Nico Hoerner. Matt talked about this yesterday, so I won't spend a super long time on it, but it really has nothing to do with Nico Hoerner and everything to do with the guy that's coming up. I just think Matt Shaw is a better offensive player. I think Matt Shaw has more of a ceiling, and because of that, and the $11.5 million Nico Hoerner is making, exactly what I just said about Bellinger, you can have a guy in Matt Shaw that could just come in and change everything for you, and I just don't think Nico Hoerner is a great candidate to do that. Nico Hoerner is a victim of the situation that he's in. And what I mean by that is that if Nico Hoerner's on the Dodgers or Nico Hoerner's on the Yankees or Nico Hoerner is somewhere where there's some star players, his production is appreciated more and he has a lot more value. But this Cubs team just has such a small margin for error offensively because, and you could roll your eyes because you know it's coming, they don't have a true superstar offensive player that increases the margin of error. So when you have such a small margin of error and you need every guy to produce, you just don't have the patience for a season like Nico Hoerner had last year offensively. And when you look at it in a vacuum, it's, I'll pull it up right now. It's not a, oh my gosh, he was terrible by any means, but the Cubs need more. He batted .273 with a .708 OPS, and it's like I keep seeing all these different things. Well, hey, you know what? His WRC plus was just above league average. He's just above league average. This guy's this. We know that, but the Cubs need more. They need more than that. League average or just above league average isn't enough when you don't have a true hub for your offense. You don't have a true superstar. And so because of that, I think Nico Hoerner's production would be appreciated more on a different team, whether it's the Mariners, whether it's the Yankees. But with the Cubs, they really don't have the margin for error to go, all right, Nico's going to be a .270 hitter, not hit a bunch of home runs and have a 7-something OPS. They need every position basically to produce more in order to get more wins than last year. Because you can't just go, well, maybe Suzuki will take a jump or maybe Happ will take a jump. You have to assume you're going to get right around their projection value. So you have to just increase the projections. And in order to do that, I just think Hoerner, bringing in Shaw instead of Hoerner is the easiest way to do that. Plus Horner's making about $11.5 million. So it's not nothing. And that would help on that front as well. So I would have Hoerner number 2. Number 3, I would have Isaac Paredes. This is a tough one. Every concern that we all had when the Cubs made this trade, and there weren't many. It was, I think that trade was met with a lot of positivity, or at least on our show. But the concern of, well, what about that slump that he's going through right now, and will he be able to hit outside of Tropicana, all came true. And it's scary how bad it was. It really is. I think among Cubs Nation, it's been under talked about how bad he was. Basically, the last month he was in Tampa, last month and a half of Tampa, and then his time here. The reason I have him 3 and not 1 or 2 is, number 1, he's only making $6 million, maybe 6.5, whatever it is. Number 2, he plays a position the Cubs just don't have a guy that they could throw in there that's ready yet. I don't want to see Matt Shaw start his career in a position he's not that comfortable with at third base. Because if it were up to me, I'd love to have Shaw at third and Nico at second, because I like Nico as a ball player better than Isaac Paredes. But I don't want to ruin Shaw's development. I don't want to put him in a position where he's uncomfortable. And so, Cam Smith's not ready. The Cubs just don't have a third baseman ready. So unless Paredes was part of a deal bringing an MLB-ready third baseman back, you kind of have to stick with them. And the hope is, the pro of keeping him is that if you get like 75% of what he was through the end of May, early June last year, Cubs will be a playoff team. Seriously. Like, he at one point he had an OPS of like 880. If he's like an 820 everyday OPS guy and he's working at bats and he's playing a league average third and the Cubs get pretty much expected stuff all over the diamond, they'll probably make the playoffs. Like, that's how valuable that would be to them. But the Cubs just got nothing from third base last year. Before they traded Morel, that was nothing. And then Paredes came and he didn't produce anything. So if we could just get anything close to what Isaac was before, he hit that really bad slump, it'll really help the Cubs. But the concern is, and why he's not last on the list and why I wouldn't be, just dismayed if they parted ways with him, is that, maybe he's not that guy. And maybe Wrigley Field really is a problem for him. And, he's another guy that has a limited ceiling and all that stuff. So he's third for those reasons, but I do think he'll probably end up staying. And then last, the guy I would least likely want to trade would be Michael Busch. Most of these reasons are self-explanatory. I mean, the financial situation's great. He's really the only guy in the everyday lineup last year that you got so much value from, right? I mean, pre-arb guy that played every day and was one of your best hitters for most of the season. I think people believe I don't like Michael Busch when it's actually the opposite, right? Expectations create that perception. I just expected him to be really good this year from everything I had heard, from all the conversations that I had and the studying that I did. I expected him to hit, and I expected him to hit right away. It was the slumps and the downsides that I really didn't expect as much. So yes, do I have questions about his potential ceiling? Sure, I do. But out of this group of 4, I think he's the least likely guy to go because, you want to hold on to guys you don't have to pay when you're in a financial situation where the Cubs are limited, whether they come out in a minute or not. It's pretty obvious for whatever reason. And, you just hope that even though he's an older rookie at 26 or was in year 2, maybe he takes a jump. And if he takes a jump, you're getting exactly the type of player that you needed. He needs to be better than he was last year. There's no question about that. Especially at the first base position. Offensively, he ended with a 775 OPS. Now that's good. Like, that's a good solid season. But again, because of where the Cubs are, if everybody could just take a little bit of a leap, that would really help. So Michael Busch is probably the least likely guy I would like to see go. There's still more I want to unpack with him. I was very impressed with how he handled first base and how he grew in that position, and maybe he can grow offensively. So that's my list. I'm interested to hear who are the guys you're most likely or most ready to part ways with, where you think the Cubs won't be impacted negatively from out of the four guys? My list, Bellinger 1. I think it's time. He's just getting paid too much, and I just don't think the production is going to match it. Number 2, Nico. Matt Shaw's ready in the wings, and what Nico really does well, this team needs more. This team needs more. Number 3, Paredes, and number 4, Michael Busch. Let me know in the comments your list. And coming up next, we're going to pivot a little bit. We're going to talk trades. We're going to talk trade deadline in the summer, but we're going to talk about the bullpen and how the Cubs really need to be smart about how they go about this. That's coming up next. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Whether it's a Cubs game, a comedy show, or a concert, I love going to live events. And now Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. The experience of searching for and then buying tickets on Game Time is simple. Plus, Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? It's game time. We are back on Locked On Cubs, and I want to pivot a little bit. We just talked about the position players and guys that I'm ready to move on from in a trade if the Cubs go that direction. And I wanted to just circle back because there was that rumor this week from Morosi that the Cubs are being really active in the bullpen market, and I really liked hearing that, and I'm going to tell you why. I want to circle back to about a week and a half ago, whenever we had Cap on. And Cap made an interesting point that I've made for a very long time. And that was, he talked about how he believes that if the Cubs were in a really good position around the July trade deadline, that Tom Ricketts would scrap the budget plan and do what he needs to do to win. And I've always felt that as well. However, it's like this chicken and the egg situation, because it's like, well, hey, if we're good in July, we'll buy. Well, to be good in July, you got to buy now. What about April through July? And I've always struggled with that, and I've understood the bullpen part of it. The reason why you don't see a lot of teams be aggressive until the end of July with the bullpen is because of the variance, because of the volatility, right? You just don't know who's really good. And in mid-May, it's like maybe a guy that had a really good month, he might be, that might be a little bit of a facade, if you will. And by the end of July, you feel really good. It's like, let's say Finnegan, for example. Finnegan broke out this year with whoever. And, by July 25th, it's like, okay, there's enough sample to know that this is legit and this guy's going to really help us get into the playoffs. I get all that. I get that, hey, if we're good in July, we're going to really go for it. I get that. But you have to put yourself in a better position to start the season, especially from the bullpen perspective. The last 2 years have been unacceptable coming out of spring training. 2023, Michael Fulmer, Brad Boxberger came out of spring training, and they just weren't ready. They just weren't ready to pitch, and they cost the Cubs a lot of games early in the season. Last year, Adbert Alzolay, Hector Neris. Adbert just wasn't ready. He wasn't performing well. It was obvious early on. The stuff didn't look good. Even when he got the job done, it didn't look right. This is a Craig Counsell job. Craig needs to do a job, Craig and Jed, this spring training to make sure that these guys are ready. Now, you're not going to have an ideal situation, in April. It's not like everything's going to be perfect, but it could be better than what it's been. It shouldn't be April 15th. We're up 4-3 in LA or whoever we're playing. And it's like, up 8th inning, we're up 4-3. This is a loss. Bullpen's a disaster. Because the last 2 years, the Cubs bullpen has not formalized and gotten to a level that's acceptable until like mid-June. And Jed even took responsibility for that in his postseason press conference. And I think Jed's part in this is very simple. He needs to just be aggressive and just get as much depth as possible so we don't have to have a Tyson Miller, Jorge Lopez rescue, because once those guys came in, it stabilized, but it shouldn't take 2 months of just some of the worst blown saves you've ever seen for that to happen. It needs to get done earlier. I understand you're going to wait for the deadline. I understand that's when you wait to make big moves, but you could do both. You could wait till then and put yourself in a good position where this bullpen is at least competent and rolling a little bit in April and May, because there's just nothing worse. In April and May, it's like, oh, we're 12-8, but out of those 8 losses, 4 of them have been blown saves. It's gut wrenching. And again, it all goes back to a star, right? The Cubs don't have a superstar. They don't have a high-end, majorly talented team. So in order for them to get to 90, 95 wins, they just can't blow that many games. The bullpen has to be solid, right? You have a different team. You throw the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Orioles, these teams, they have a large margin for error. If they blow, 8 of their first 16 save attempts, they're fine. They know they're going to get rolling at some point. We don't know that. We don't have that type of top end talent. That's just the reality. So if you're not going to have that top end talent, if you're not going to have those superstar level players, you have to get the margins right. You have to get the bullpen right, where at least in April and May, you are putting out a competent bullpen product. And then by June, July, you could really enhance it. So I thought that was interesting that Cap talked about that they'll wait till July and then go for it. But you got to do something from April to July to earn that right to go for it. And I think the Cubs and Jed Hoyer can be much better coming out of spring training, having a bullpen 7, 8, 9, whatever it is, feeling good, ready to go, so they could close out some of those games early, and we don't have to go through such gut-wrenching, really difficult defeats like we've had to do the last 2 years, because those are tough, man. That Padres lost last year, that Diamondbacks lost last year, the Marlins lost, I know people disagree with me on this. I know Boog 100% does. I don't believe that those are just, it's one loss, you come back the next day. I believe that, most teams are going to win 60, they're going to lose 60. What are you going to do with the other 40? I believe in that, and those games all fall under the other 40. So the Cubs got to be sharp with that. And this offseason, I like that they're going to be aggressive in the bullpen, get as many guys that you feel like will be competent and helpful at the back end. I think there's some rumors going around. I don't know if it's official yet that they added Ryan Tepera on a minor league deal. I'm not really sure how significant that is, but I want to see them have options. And if it's going poorly early, they don't have to stick with a certain guy. Just move it around, makeshift it, so this team early in the season can win games that they're supposed to win, because that's going to be a really big key in 2025. So just wanted to mention that, because I just think I think there's nothing more frustrating than blowing late leads in baseball, especially early in the year when you're trying to get your footing, right? Like the difference between 9-9 and 13 and 5. I mean, or 12-6. That could all just be bullpen stuff. And 9-9, you're like, oh, this is a mediocre team. 11-7, 12-6, you feel really good about things. And that all comes down to just being able to close games and win the games you're supposed to. And a team that doesn't have a superstar needs to do that more than most teams, because you're just not going to have that many opportunities. It's that simple. Coming up next, we're going to get into our best and worst, our Friday tradition, best and worst of the week. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You guys have no idea how much I've been using FanDuel lately. It keeps me going. It keeps me going with sports when sports is just becoming a little bit boring. And FanDuel is the best. It's the best. You could tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, MLB action. You could bet on guys of who's going to go where, Juan Soto's next destination. It's America's #1 sports book. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, college basketball if you want, NBA if you want to go that route. All in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. There's a Thursday night game tonight. I'm recording right now before that game. Lions-Packers. Interesting line on FanDuel. Lions only favored by 3, which feels a little bit trappy. I'm thinking that the Lions had so many injuries on Thanksgiving. They're dismantled defensively that's causing the line to go there. I'm debating if I'm going to end up just laying the 3 and just believe in this Detroit team to figure it out. And I don't like to miss an opportunity to root against Green Bay. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We are back here on Locked On Cubs, and it's time for best and worst of the week. Best of the week is, and it's kind of been my best of the week, I think, the last couple times, and I'm just going to keep it going because it's true. I'm enjoying this MLB offseason a little bit. It seems like Passan talked about yesterday that he thinks that Juan Soto should be, have his decision made by Monday night, which should really drive the winter meetings and make the winter meetings exciting. That's great for the sport. I really like, the Boyd signing to start this week, I think set some people off a little bit. But since then, there's just been a lot of Cubs trade talk. It feels like the Cubs are really, I would love for them to just get better in free agency and not have to give up guys. We all know that 100%, but at least they're trying, at least they're engaged in these talks and trying to improve their team as much as they can. And, as somebody that is on a show every day with Matt, last winter meetings was tough. There's no question about it. And so I'm excited. I'm excited for next week. I'm excited. We're going to, start promoting our holiday show coming up soon next week. We're going to do that. A lot of exciting things happening, and hopefully the Cubs can get better in the next couple of weeks. That's all that matters. It's just about winning baseball games. You know that. Worst of the week, I have to pivot. I know it's a Cubs show, but the Eberflus stuff, the way they handled it, not only did they fire him far too late, they didn't even fire him the correct way. And when you watch the press conference of the firing on Monday, I think it was just uncomfortable, wasn't handled right. Ryan Poles looked really uncomfortable, like Kevin Warren was almost like lecturing him during the press conference. It was very awkward. And I just left the press conference feeling very, very small amounts of confidence at best that that the Bears are going to get this next hire right. I just didn't feel good about it whatsoever. And it's just, one organization's problems doesn't make another one better. So I know that the Bears' incompetence doesn't make what the Cubs are doing look better, but man, am I glad we don't have to handle that. I know it's probably good for content, but it is just, how can you be positive about that situation? Now, the big positive thing is that they may hire Thomas Brown and that, he seems like a great guy. Look, he probably is, but everyone's going to seem more competent to what they were dealing with. That doesn't mean you hire the guy. It's just a real mess over there, and it's sad. It's sad. But what's not sad is that the Cubs might make a big trade soon. And we covered the 4 guys most likely to go in a trade from the big league team, not the minor leagues. We know the Triantos of the world may go, the Alcantras. We did a trade value episode. I want to hear Bellinger, Horner, Isak, and Bush. Who do you feel like are you ready to part ways with? Who's the safest guys to trade to make this team better? Let me know in the comments, and I hope everybody has a tremendous weekend. We'll be back Monday. Winter meetings next week. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. Thank you so much for checking out this edition of Locked On Cubs. You give us 20 to 30 minutes. We'll give you all things Cubs with a laugh or two along the way. Be sure to hit subscribe on YouTube, smash the like button for the algorithm, and leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcasts. I'm Sam Olber, and this is Locked On Cubs.
Go Cubs.